This is
Make It Plain.
Make it plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's always very, very special and an honor to have my comrade on the air and in the streets for so many years, who has a brand new memoir out entitled Radioactive, a memoir of advocacy in action on the air and in the streets. The Black Eagle joins us, Joe Madison. Hey man, how are you?
Well, I'm fine. Appreciate this opportunity, and I appreciate you. You know, I have to always say to people who are listening and watching, because I always ask how that boy is doing.
Yeah.
And I just have to keep asking so that when he's in this first World Series, I'm looking for some tickets, man. Third baseline.
Well, you got him. You got him. You always asking about him, and I appreciate that.
He's such a good kid. He's such a good kid, and I know you're really proud of him.
He's so good. I can't believe I raised him. When
I look at my my gaggle of children, and people think I'm crazy. We usually try to have during birthday, what we call birthday month. Some of them are born October, June, or whatever,
right.
And we all get together for a meal. And I just sit there and marvel at just how smart they are, and when I was their age, for the most part, they have traveled all over the world. Right. I just sit there just listening, people say, oh, no, you couldn't possibly be. I just sit there and listen to them because it is just, they're just so far ahead of where I was at their age.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also shows, with all that, the work we've done as parents. I mean, to me, that's the most rewarding thing. When you say, even with all the causes we fought for, it's still most rewarding to see our children doing so well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, when you consider what a lot of parents are going through, but I should point out, we're still very concerned because at any point in time, they still go through what other young Black men and women go through. Right. So I worry, right? Yeah. About when they get pulled over.
Absolutely.
I worry about how they're impacted in this global economy. But at the same time, you've done the best that you can, and you just have to put your faith in the Lord.
Yeah, no question about it. Well, first of all, how's your health, man? You just were on that big hunger strike.
74 days. It's back to normal. I'm not back to where I was. And I don't necessarily think I want to get back there, but I'm still very cautious about what I eat. I got in the habit after 74 days of eating broth and making smoothies. So I still do that.
Right.
That's the one thing you learn. It had been a long time since I had done a hunger strike, as you know, with Dick Gregory.
Right.
And the one thing he did teach us was you just don't jump back into eating regularly, and hopefully there's a consciousness that you develop, and I do watch my intake of sugar and fat and that type of thing. So, but I'm okay. I always answer that question, and with this answer, it's not about my health. We really, as you know, Mark, we really should be concerned about the health of the country. We should, that's what that is the real issue. What is the health of this country? When you look at the things we have to cover, the issues we have to educate people about, when you look at politically, when it comes to voter suppression, even like with DeSantis forming a special law enforcement agency to check voter fraud, which in Florida, which basically, I said it the other day on the air, that goes back to what Hitler did in 1933. And so it's the health of the country that I'm worried about, and the health of particularly of Black folk who are becoming more and more politically active, especially the young people. And they're doing all they can to discourage and suppress our vote, because they know what's at stake. And so it's not about my health. It's really about the health of our community. What happened in Michigan, what happened in Connecticut. It's that's really where the attention should be.
And on the point of voting rights, so and then we will get into the book particularly, but Joe, there's still a lot of frustration, a lot of demoralization around the fact that the voting rights issue has still not really been solved. We still, the bills that needed to be passed didn't happen. Joe Manchin blocked everything. What are your thoughts about that? And what are you saying to people? Because, when I talk to a lot of the voter mobilization organizations that are still out here in the fight, they're having trouble motivating people, because they feel like, well, we fought for the Democrats to be in power, and yet they did not, or they were not able, they were blocked from delivering protection for our voting rights. What's your take on that, and what are you saying to your listeners?
Well, what I said after they weren't able to get Manchin and Sinema over, first thing was, you had 90% of the Democrats that did the right thing. No ifs, ands, buts about it. And initially they hadn't. I have been in conversations with several Democratic senators that were on the fence about whether to change the filibuster. But all hell broke loose. And they started changing one by one. So they would get into these caucus meetings and they started changing their vote. All of them but two. But not one single Republican would have the courage to stand up and protect our rights. So the issue is, 98% of the Democrats did, 0% of the Republicans did, number one. Number two, I think what happened was we woke up, and I wrote this, I wrote about this, we woke up a sleeping giant, and that was the young people. Most of them didn't know how the Senate worked. We knew. They didn't know about filibustering. We knew. And they ended up realizing the process that you had to go through to get this legislation passed. And many of them committed themselves. And so we're now talking about mobilizing. I was with Nancy Pelosi and a group of members of the House of Representatives. And Nancy Pelosi said something that I want us to think about. She said, and this was in the passage of the Willie Lynch anti-lynching bill. She said, in Congress, we maneuver. That's what we do. We maneuver. We maneuver for this vote, that vote. But what y'all did to get the anti-lynching bill passed was you mobilized. And that's what we do. We mobilize. So the frustration, I'm with you. Why is it taking so long to get everybody together? Not wait until September, October, but start mobilizing now. Now, we have heard from we know that Reverend Barber is putting a piece together. And so my argument, and I'm from the Dick Gregory School. I'm telling y'all, check your leadership egos at the door. You do like Quincy Jones did with We Are the World. There's a bunch of talented people. They all were major stars. Okay, I know y'all are leaders. I understand that. But check your leadership institutional egos at the door, and find a corner somewhere in America, get your heads together, and put together what I would call a Freedom Summer. Freedom Summer 2. I remember, I'm not old enough to have participated, but you remember when the students went down to Freedom Summer in Mississippi? Those are students. They mobilized. And so that's really what this is all about. It's really Freedom Summer. And that's what this summer ought to be about. Finance it, organize it, and then get your butts out in the street and get people registered, educate them on the issues. And Lord knows we've got issues that you can mobilize people around.
That's right. That's what has to be done.
It really does. And I'll say to the young folk out there, you don't have to wait on us old heads to do that. Young people. Let me tell you, young people mobilized to get that anti-lynching bill passed. They were the ones that used their internet and their social media. Yeah. And that's what I'm hoping will happen. I'm hoping they're listening and hearing this discussion we're having.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what has to happen. The book is radioactive. So, Joe, when did the bug for activism first bite you?
In college. And this was the late 60s. Malcolm had been assassinated before I actually got into college. The civil rights movement was something that was always in front of us. The assassination of Martin Luther King while I was in college, the Vietnam War protest, and directly in college at a state college in Wisconsin, where the Black students were trying to establish a Black history course, just one Black history course. And we met with terrible opposition. And then, of course, even after we were a success, and there was another thing. We were trying to get a Black, a Black center, a Black cultural center. Now, they had Jewish cultural center. They had other cultural centers, but we wanted a Black cultural center. And we had to go to the Board of Regents to protest. We had to march and demonstrate. We had to fight the administration. And then even when a few years later, we were successful across the country. And this was happening not just where I was in Wisconsin, but it was happening all over the country. There was a group of football players. I can't think of the university. Was it Wyoming? These were top-rate scholar athletes who had been asked by the Black students on campus, because they were athletes and well-known, to please get involved in the effort in the movement. And all the athletes decided to do, these are football players, was to wear Black armbands in solidarity. The coach said if they wore those Black armbands, he would kick them off the football team. He would take their scholarships away from them. They didn't. He took every one of their scholarships. They all had to go off to different colleges. Now, the team ended up having a losing season because of it. I was talking to a fellow colleague of ours, Russ Parr, who is with Radio One. And Russ Parr, when he read the book, he said, "You know, we have something in common. I was a star quarterback on my high school team, and my coach kicked me off the team because he wouldn't cut his afro." And so that's how I got that's how I got the bug. And I realized that I was part of a movement, but I also realized that all movements require sacrifice. Matter of fact, there's a chapter on just that very statement. There's a difference between a moment and a movement. And what's the difference? Sacrifice. All movements require sacrifice. So what happened to me? I got kicked off the football team. And I was captain of an undefeated freshman team. Never in the history of the school and it hasn't happened since. And the varsity coach sent me a letter in the middle of the summer, basically saying, "Don't report to practice because you're off the team because we don't want your kind on the team." Well, you know, that door shut. High school coach, Mr. Marquette, I always remember him. He said, "You know what? Don't worry." And that's how I ended up at Washington University with a football coach that was just, you know, he understood what needed to be done. He wanted me on the team, and I ended up with the best possible education that I could possibly get. So and I write about it. All the chapters in the book, Mark, are relatively short chapters. You know, they're not these 100-page chapters, because I wanted people to hear it in my voice.
And it's an incredible story, a powerful story. You finished Washington, and then you went on to Detroit and the NAACP. And you cut a lot of your political teeth there too, didn't you?
Oh, Lord, yes. Oh, God, yes.
You were the youngest. What?
I'm sorry?
You were the youngest executive secretary? Was that?
At the time, I was 24 years old. And I was, at the time, the youngest secretary. You know, they call them executive secretaries then. But you ran the branch. And I got to tell you, when you say cut your teeth, I got a better explanation. It was a baptism of fire. Man, I mean, and it's funny. I mean, and most of these folk were, somebody pulled me aside and said that most of these people on the board, they were about the average age of 64. Man, they had been through union fights. They had been through the political fights, the election of Coleman Young, and they would give me hell. I mean, nobody gave you permission to do this. You need to get permission to do that. And then somebody, one of the older guys, pulled me aside and said, "Look, you know, it's not that they don't like you. Some of them don't. But let me tell you, they wouldn't tolerate you if they didn't think you had something going for you, if they didn't think you had potential. And you have to keep in mind, some of these old heads wouldn't give their children, their grown children, the keys to their car, let alone the keys to the largest NAACP chapter in the country. And so, you know, that you're gonna catch hell, but they wouldn't tolerate you if they thought it was a waste of time. And as the decades went by, I would run into, and these men were much older, elders, and I thought they didn't like me. And I'd see them years later, and they would, "Oh man, we just loved you. You know, oh brother, oh man, it's so good to see you. And oh, you know, that you know, and my wife would always say, Sherry would always say, wait a minute, is that the same judge that was giving you hell 10 years ago or 20 years ago? I said, yeah. Well, what changed? Let me give you an example. Rosa Parks, who would listen to the show, and a guy named Art Featherstone, we were really upset because the city of Dearborn, which was the home of Ford Motor Company, introduced and passed an ordinance, a local ordinance, saying that if you weren't a resident of the city of Dearborn, you could not use their parks. Now, Dearborn and Detroit are as close to each other as we are now, you know, just cross the street. And so we decided to boycott every business in Dearborn. They had a huge regional mall, and black folk were spending their money out there. So during just before what they now call Black Friday, we decided to boycott, and we ended up calling the boycott. And there was a spontaneous reaction because Dearborn had this history. Less than 1% black folk. And all hell broke loose. Henry Ford picked up the phone, called the mayor, called a federal judge, called a local. He called every black leader that he had in his Rolodex and said, who in the hell is this young guy calling a boycott of my city, yada, yada, yada. Well, the next day, actually Black Friday, 70% of the black folks stopped shopping in Dearborn. And what happened? These black folk leaders jumped me. They jumped me. And Coleman Young, and I write about this in the book, there was a meeting. It was a Saturday morning, and I found out that they've been having these kitchen cabinet Saturday morning meetings to discuss all kind of issues. And they wanted me at the meeting. Command performance. You know, so I go and I'm going, wow, man, here's this leader, that leader. And you know, if I mention their names, you know, I'm not going to because they're no longer here to defend themselves. And Coleman Young said, you should have got permission from me to call a boycott of Dearborn. And I naively said, I don't need your permission because I'm running the NAACP. I don't need your permission to call a boycott. And he looked me in the eye and said, young man, you need my permission to fart in this city. Now, I like you. And you remind me of myself when I was your age. Now, we're going to have to figure this out. Because you got Henry Ford calling me, and I got business. I got to build they're building the Renaissance Center. He's a big contributor to the NAACP Freedom Fund dinner. And so we got to figure it out. But you know what? They did figure it out. So they figured it out that they would get the mayor of Dearborn to rescind the ordinance and take it to court in the Michigan Supreme Court. And they did. And we won in the court. And the fun part of it, Mark, was the Detroit Free Press had Art Featherstone and myself. I don't think Rosa was in the picture. On the front page of the Detroit Free Press, we won. We won. And that's the kind of thing, you know, a lot of folks don't realize that you go through. And you know, so there are all kind of stories like that.
And that's dude, you had to pay those dues. That was that dues paying, you know.
I guess that's, you know what, you're right. You know, it's been a long time since, you know, Mark, it's been a long time since I've heard that phrase.
Yeah.
You had to pay your dues. You're absolutely right.
Right. And especially with the elders like that. I mean, we've all been in that position.
But you know, they came through some hell of struggles.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, these guys, there were some folks who were pro UAW in Detroit, and there were some folks who were pro Ford Motor Company, Henry Ford. And by the way, they weren't speaking to each other. It's been, wait a minute, it's been 30, 40 years. They didn't speak to, well, they spoke to each other, but they didn't trust each other. Right. So one guy, the union folks would pull me aside and say, you can't trust them Henry Ford folk. And then the Henry Ford people would pull me aside and say, well, you can't trust them. Right. And churches were divided.
Yeah.
They had churches that were divided. Yeah.
And to be a young activist trying to navigate through all of that. But it's funny, the generational thing. I just say this quickly. I had an almost identical scenario with Marion Barry when I was in my 20s. And he's like, no, you have to come through me. And he said the same thing. He said, you remind me of myself. And so, yeah, those are the things that you know, you have to go through. But it's generational, even with the NAACP. The NAACP, and, you know, that's our organization and we love it. But it's what's the word? It's attrition, so to speak, is usually with the elders. And young people come through, and there's just always this historical tension between the younger folk and the older folk in NAACP, and a lot of folk in the leadership who sustain the organization are older. And so when the young folk come, it's an ongoing type of a thing, and somehow we figure it out and we make it. But now, when you were in Detroit and you were organizing and executive secretary, that's when. Well, I know you did radio in college too.
It was, you know, somebody brought that up, but it was a station that didn't have. I mean, it had so little power you couldn't light a lamp.
Yeah.
But you know, it was a campus station. Yeah.
And so, but then you went on WCHB, big black station in Detroit.
It was a public affairs show. Yes.
Right. And on that station, you were able. And that's how, you know, people like us have always been able to use radio, not just, you know, to talk, but to mobilize and to inform and to get people going. And that's what you were doing on WCHB, really, with some of the NAACP work, right?
Yeah, we had the station. Thank God, it was owned by two doctors. One was a dentist and a businessman. And WCHB, and they owned a local AM station. That was when AM was hot. They also owned a jazz station, but they made sure that the NACP had a weekend public affairs show. And the executive director, the executive secretary, myself, that was my responsibility, was to produce that show, bring on the guests. And you're absolutely right. It was to inform and mobilize. But they would also do that. Those are the days when you could go into the morning show there was a guy named Butterball Jr., Wade Briggs, and he was a popular morning show host. And literally, you could go to the station, and in between records, you know, Mark Thomas is in the studio. Brother, man, what's going on? Well, I'm here to tell you about, we got this rally being planned. Madison's in the studio. And that's how they would provide that information in between spinning records. And that was their mission. That was their mission. So you got a little bit of music, a little bit of entertainment, but at the same time, the community, through the broadcasters and the platform, were informed about what was going on. That
was always, and that's,
it's
you know, Yeah.
And,
I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. I mean, what we gained from, syndicated black radio, we also lost in terms of that local flair. I mean, just to even break this down, and you probably remember this, when WOL was on 4th and H, and we had the big picture window out there, somebody called in during the show and say their car was stolen. We go on the radio and find the car. We have people look out for this car, y'all. This is a license plate. Miss Mamie's car was stolen, and everybody in the community be riding around town. They would find that car. I mean, so that's the only thing that's the kind of thing, unfortunately, that we lost in moving to syndication and the way radio is structured
Mark,
these days.
Mark, let me tell you. This is a true story. True story. And I think I got to go back. I think it's in the book because a lot of things but let me tell you. Rosa Parks had been in an accident. And a lot of people don't know she was a receptionist for John Conyers. Most people, they know Rosa Parks today. Most people had forgotten Rosa Parks. Now that's a whole nother story. She had been in an accident. So a group of us decided to buy Rosa Parks a new car. A young car dealer who was from India owned a Buick dealership. And he cut us a deal where we could get a car, brand new rose-colored Buick. And we had to raise a certain amount of money, and we did. And we presented the car to Rosa Parks on stage at a fundraiser event. And then, hold on. So was it a few weeks, maybe months later? I don't know the time frame. Somebody stole Rosa Parks' car. I'm not kidding you. Man, I went over to Butterball Jr., got on the air, and said, somebody has stolen Rosa Parks' car. Before the lunchtime, that car was parked with the I'm not.
That's right. That's right.
With the car in it, with the keys. I'm sorry, with the keys in the car. I mean, and again, that's why I wanted to write the book, because people need to. But you hit it. I mean, that's exactly how broadcasting worked, how we mobilized. That's a true story. The keys were parked. I don't know remember if it was in front of her apartment or where, but the keys were in the car.
found the car, and that's something. Now, and obviously, all the work that you've done, you also did not leave out your regard and your commitment to where we all come from, Africa. And you did a lot of great work when it comes to the struggle in Sudan, and still are.
Oh yeah. This is you were with us right now in Sudan, and this is why it bothers me. I understand all the attention about Ukraine. I really, that's the humanitarian in me. I recognize that. But right now, as we speak, 70% of the population in southern Sudan is starving right now. 70%, and there's hardly. I don't think I've seen a single story on any of the networks. Now, you did something, thank God, you and April Ryan and Roland Martin. And I had folks that I had worked with during the Darfur struggles who called me and said, Joe, please, you've got to get some attention. 70% of my people are actually, and I'm not making, this is not hyperbole, are actually starving to death. Not enough food to eat. But I got involved because I was on the air. A group out of Switzerland said, we have got to get Black folk, African Americans, to know what's going on, because nobody knew it was going on. And this was during their Civil War. Now, this is before George Clooney got involved. Thank God that he did. And so they said, please come with us. But now we need to tell you, there's a war going on, and this war has been going on for 25 years. And this is going to be a very dangerous trip. And because you're going to go into a war zone. You're going to sleep in tents in the brush. I decided to do it. And then I realized, and then what I write about is how they were taking women and children, slaves, and literally selling these people into slavery. And so I went back and forth probably about 6 times, came back to the United States, raised money to do this, to actually buy these slaves and then free them. And what happened, we had to get Sudanese to pretend that they were buying slaves for their purpose. And I always remember that a goat in southern Sudan costs more than a woman or a child. And the horror stories of how I met a southern Sudanese woman. I think she was Dinka, and she was forced to give birth in a goat pen. A child was born in a goat pen. Now, I understood the risk and the debate between Muslims and most of the Dinkas were Christians, and the Nation of Islam was not happy, and I understood it, but that was just the sacrifice I had to make, and I was not going to let that bother me, and so we ended up freeing over 7,000 slaves and returning them to their villages, and then of course South Sudan became a excuse me, had to put the power in. South Sudan became a country, which is now the youngest country on the continent of Africa.
Folks, the book is Radioactive, a memoir of advocacy in action on the air and in the streets. You all always hear me say there's a difference between talk radio and do radio. And that's what Joe Madison has always done. That's what we both always tried to do, and that's what Black radio calls for. Really, y'all. We just can't sit around and talk. We've always had to use these.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and this was, and it was never about the personality. Joe and I. When Rush Limbaugh was alive, he going to talk on the air 4 or 5 hours a day and just talk about himself, talk to himself, promote himself. But in our community, it just was not possible to do. We weren't interested in that anyway. And Joe has been doing just that all his life, all his broadcast career. You
remember Artie Elliott. You remember how we
Artie Elliott? We did. We marched. We sure did.
This is why
that was a 26-mile march.
That was, and this is a young man coming home from work, going to his mother's house, and he gets pulled over by police wearing shorts. I don't even think he had a shirt on, and I don't know why they stopped him and handcuffed him behind his back, strapped him in the front seat of a police car, and shot him 14 times. And 14 times while he's handcuffed and strapped in. And both of those police officers, by the way, were African American.
That's right.
Both of them were. And we marched on 26 miles.
That's right.
To try to get a special prosecutor.
Right. Right.
to retry these police officers, or to at least open the case again.
You know, I
And
feel that
yeah,
march in my bones, and in my skin. That is the first time in my life I was ever sunburned. I got sunburned on them. I know what sunburn was, and nobody was putting nothing on to protect themselves. I got sunburned in my. Now that we're talking about it, I can actually feel the sunburn. I was 26 miles, and then I remember the CIA crack cocaine
oh
conspiracy
God,
and
oh
all that
man,
we did with Dick Gregory, and going to jail at the CIA,
oh absolutely,
and the
man.
DEA.
Yeah.
I thought they were gonna kill us at the DEA though, Joe.
Well,
So,
I always, yeah, I did too. But I always remember
that one was a
they
little different. That was a little
they
different.
they separated you, Joe, Laura, and myself, put us in with the general population. And these guys are looking at us wondering, well, and had to lock us in the cell, and took Dick off to some, yeah, I'm going to tell on him, took him off to some exclusive lockup. And then the next morning, everybody, we're frog walk, handcuffed, go to be in, to go before the judge. We go past this area where Dick is, and it's damn near like a den. It's got a flat screen TV, basketball court on the outside, and we're all worried, thinking they done took Dick off someplace to who knows what. And Dick is sitting there smiling, and then and so Joe Laurie just cut on Dick. Joe Laurie just said, "Well, I'll be damned.
he was mad.
We sitting up here worrying all about you, and you sitting up here in a luxurious cell,
Right.
wood panel.
Right.
That's where they put the celebrities." And Dick said, "Well, you Negroes didn't get that pizza I sent down there to y'all."
And remember, Joe was angry because Dick kind of tricked us. The plan was not necessarily to get arrested that day. We went to the DA. And the reason I thought we were all goners was because when we got there, remember, we had Celerino Castillo with us. He was one of the people who was flying the planes.
He was DEA, right?
Right. And we had been to the National Press Club first, and he had paperwork. He had flight manifests.
That's right.
So we got there, and he put the flight manifest in the face, like right up in the man's face, y'all, the head of the DEA security. I said, wait a minute, this is a little different right here. This they're not gonna treat this like nothing else. He was one of theirs. They took him, then sent the media away. I said, Dick, usually when they send the media away, they don't want them to see the media shoot us. And they put up a perimeter. And Joe said, wait a minute, I got a flight out of National at 4:00. And Dick said, you ain't going out of there today. And we thought we were done. Then I was like, I think this is it. Right here. We got on our knees and prayed. I said, I think this might be it. And then you know what? I was saying this to Dick before he died. You know what, Joe? We never saw Celerino Castillo again. Think about that. When's the last time you ever saw? We never saw him after that day.
I don't know where he is.
Don't know what happened to him. We never saw that brother again.
Yeah, I really don't know. I know that Dick and I got arrested at the CIA. We got arrested there a couple of times. And up to the point where they really got serious with us, and they were very serious. But we went before the judge, and the judge told our attorneys that look, if y'all keep this getting arrested and coming out here to the CIA gate, tell you the next time we're gonna put you and Dick. They told Joe and Dick, we're gonna put y'all in jail for a year. So y'all cut a deal, and do what you got to do. But if you come back out here one more time, we went out there, and Mark, Dick Gregory had asked me to get a crime tape, the yellow crime tape.
Crime tape, right? Put the crime tape on, right?
And said, let's wrap it around the front gate of the CIA.
Right.
Oh, okay. So they still wouldn't arrest us. And they were just going to wait us out till it got dark.
Yeah.
And then he had already, and he was always thinking. He said, "You remember I told you to get some flour, a bag of flour. I said, yeah, good. Go back to the car, get this bag of flour. And he and I went up to the gate and dumped the flour in front of the CIA gate. Man, they ended up bringing dogs out, I guess, to check to see if it was cocaine or drugs, whatever. And Dick cracked on them. And Dick turned around and said, them dogs are not going to be able to make nothing out of that but biscuits. And I mean, and then it was like, no, y'all, you Negroes are going to jail, you know. And but I learned so much from him. And the most important thing I learned, and you learned, is not to be afraid. Dick said that all the time. Fear, God and fear, can't occupy the same space, no more than light and darkness.
No, you're right.
And that's what I really learned from him.
Yeah.
Is to cast fear aside.
Yeah, certainly. Folks, a sterling career. Folks, we're having this conversation. The book is published. We must, as a people, tell our own stories. Nobody's going to tell these stories for us.
Yeah.
So what Joe is not, it's not just Joe doing this for himself either. People have been after me, when you going to write a book? And after a while, it becomes dereliction of duty, because white folks ain't going to write our stories. These stories need to be written, especially now at this time when people are attacked using CRT to attack learning, to attack knowledge, to attack Black history. It's like we're going back to the days when they didn't want us to read. So, folks, get the book. It's available everywhere. Share the story. Share the story with young people. We got to go back to the way we used to do it. If our schools aren't going to teach us these stories, we have to teach them in our churches. We have to teach them Saturday morning at home, and we have to do more reading. So, folks, it's available everywhere. Radioactive, a memoir of advocacy in action on the air and in the streets.
Yeah, and Mark, I so appreciate it, and it's not, like I said, it's not a 500 page book. I deliberately wanted it to be a book that in a week you could read it, and
what do you like to say? Put it where the ghosts can get it. Yeah,
and by the way, there, as you know, there people think they know us. They know us as broadcasters. They know us as we were. I go back to being abandoned by my mother at the age of 2.
Right. That's right.
And thinking and working on a dump.
Yeah.
What we now call landfill.
Yeah.
With my grandfather.
That's
right. So wait a minute. So Joe Madison writes about working on a dump the summer, and then wait a minute. And then there's a chapter about interviewing the first Black president in the Oval Office.
To go from that to that. Yeah.
So you go from working on a landfill and at the age of 10, 11, whatever, and to interviewing Barack Obama. It's the story. It's not where you've come from. It's the journey.
Right.
And that's basically what I try to put the book together with Dr. Canton. Here's the journey on air and in the streets.
Yeah. And that is your trajectory of our struggle. Ketanji Brown Jackson said it best, from in one generation to have gone from segregation to the Supreme Court. That is our experience here in America.
That's right.
And it is a compelling story. And we would be remiss if we did not say we witnessed Joe learn who his real father was on television.
Yeah.
And listen, all of us
just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, this didn't happen when I was in my 20s and 30s or a teenager. Hell, I'm 70-some years old, and I find out the man you thought was your father all your life, he is my father. He will be my father, but he's not your biological father. And I got 2 brothers. I got 2. One of them I grew up with. In Dayton, Ohio. Yeah.
So, folks, we talk about the Sankofa bird. Go back and fetch it. the Black Eagle is giving us an opportunity to go back and fetch some of this history as well, and to learn about his story. And so, folks, do check it out. Once again, Radioactive, a memoir of advocacy and action on the air and in the streets. The great Joe Madison. Joe, always a pleasure to have you on Make It Plain, brother.
My best to you and your family and
yours too.
And again, you tell that young man of yours, no, don't, I'm looking for them third baseline tickets.
You'll have them.
All right, man. God bless. And thank you, Mark, for this. And just go to Amazon.com or JoeMadison.com and the book, and let me know how you think of, what people think of it. Would appreciate all the feedback. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. As always, perform an act of kindness on behalf of an elder or young person. Write a letter to a sister or brother who just so happens to find her or himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand. And above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us is that we give each other love. Thanks for giving MIP love. And please remember to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.